Brian, how long have I got? 15 minutes. 15, 20 minutes. Perfect. Okay, first and foremost, thanks ever so much for inviting me, Brian. Really appreciate it. I know Sam Manicom was supposed to be here. Sam Manicom, for anybody who's read his books or knows him, is a top chap who sadly has been shielded a little bit due to COVID, so he can't be with us today. But if anybody wants to support Sam, he's an independent author, so if you need any Christmas presents or anything, just go on his website and buy his books, because he would appreciate that, because I think he's itching at the bootstraps to get out to bike shows and things like that. He would have been at the NEC for these 9 days starting today. So yeah, support him if you can, because I'm sure he would appreciate that. So as a stand-in with a slightly subpar trip that I did now a few years ago, if I am honest, I'm talking about a long trip and time moves on. But it was essentially Sydney to London, on a 105cc Australian postal bike, which if anybody's ridden the C90, very much like a C90. It is true that it was done in 2.5 days of planning, but I did have a little bit more research behind it. It wasn't sort of like setting off into the unknown, not knowing the routes or the visas or the carnet de passage or any of those intricate details of overland travel. So the research was there, and I guess I always stress that what's most important is like the research. But the planning itself, it was a case of deciding to do it on the Thursday and leave on the Sunday. Hence why, the new pair of Converse high tops for good foot protection, new pair of skateboarding trousers just in case wanted to pull off any moves along the way. As you can see, an aluminium box on the back, milk crate, open face helmet, no gloves, and a 105cc bike, which if anybody's been to Australia will know them to be Australian postal bikes. So they're used by the postal service for about 3 years or 20,000 kilometres, and then once they reach retirement age, they get retired off, and then people buy them and just use them for whatever purpose. To be honest, I've got quite a legacy as overland travel bikes, especially in Australia. There's people go round the coast on them, through the centre of them. There's extreme postie bike clubs that put different suspension on and take them through the outback and things like that. So, there is a background to using those bikes on bigger trips than what people might notionally perceive them to be suitable for. 4-speed gearbox, centrifugal clutch, so no clutch lever, but a clutch in the gearbox. Telescopic fork, so slightly like a C90, but a little bit more trail friendly. CT stands for Cub Trail. So, as ridiculous as that vehicle might look, and as ridiculous as I might look and dressed for that occasion, in a sense, for going around the world on a limited budget with limited technical or mechanical knowledge, I kind of was as best set up as possible could be, really. I probably won't replicate it and do it again tomorrow. I'd probably dress a little bit more appropriately and might have a slightly bigger bike. But in the occasion of not having a lot of money, funding it on credit cards, having no ability to stay in Australia, which was my original plan, simple visa restrictions and things meant that I had to leave. I didn't want to go home, I didn't have anything to go back to, but I had a bike. So setting off on a bike across the outback, if anybody spots a slight difference, the first bike that I set off on that last picture blew up within 3 days of setting off. So best laid plans and all that. But that was all poor Doris. So Doris was a bike I got off eBay, and I ragged her mercilessly up to Brisbane, where the bottom end went. So I guess that was the first test as, what do I do? I'm serious about getting to England. It's a long way away. I've never travelled a long distance before, overland. I've never done anything like this. I've never done a big motorcycle trip. Schoolboy motocross and a TZR 125 as a 17, 18-year-old, but never overlanded like this. And I read Chris Scott's book, which is a great place to start. But really, I was kind of stepping into the unknown and didn't really know what was going to happen, but knew that I just had enough in me to give it a go. And I guess that's, that defines motorcycle travel to me anyway. The bike is irrelevant, the kit is irrelevant, where you're going is irrelevant. But if you're getting on your bike and giving it a good go, that's kind of motorcycle adventure. And for me, that was by far the biggest thing I could ever envisage. But the least palatable option was getting on a flight and flying in. I really wanted to try that motorcycle trip. I really wanted to see if it was possible for me to do it with the means I got, the mindset I got. And I guess I set off, as I say, Sunday morning, and you ride over Sydney Harbour Bridge, and it's like ahead of me is a road that goes theoretically all the way to England. Yeah, there's lots of altercations, and there's Iran and Pakistan and China issues and Indonesia, Burma, Indonesia to get across. So there's lots of intricacies of a big bike trip, but if you start with the wheels rolling, I guess it kind of all flows from there. So a big problem becomes a small problem as long as you chop it down into a small problem, and then it's kind of going on and on and on. And kind of aware that Brian had only given me 20 minutes, and to be honest, I normally could talk for at least 3 or 4 hours. When I went through my photos the other day, well, actually last night, because I still plan everything totally last minute. And I'm quite impressed that I managed to find a tie and a shirt. If you ask my wife, I even got married in a pair of Gain all-terrain trials boots on the Las Vegas. We disappeared to Las Vegas on a GS 1200. So I have had bigger bikes since the proto bike, so I'm not a big bike snob or a small bike snob. But what defined going through my collection of photos, of which, as you all obviously know, you end up with thousands of photos, some good, some bad, some different. What defined my collection of photos when I went through them is people. And that's never really stood out before to me, because we're used to meeting and seeing people and interacting with people, which to me is the essence of travelling on a motorcycle or travelling by any means. Meeting people is something we don't always do in day-to-day life. And I guess the last 2 years has been a reminder that we need to meet people, and I'd missed meeting people and obviously not realised how much that means to me. So when I went through my photos last night, all I saw was the people I'd met. They were the photos that stood out. So the scenery and the landscape and those wow photos that you might send off to a magazine in the hope of getting published kind of were no longer relevant, because what does an Indonesian landscape look like? Well, kind of it don't matter. What does an Australian landscape look like? Well, it doesn't really matter. What matters is the people I've met and the people that I remembered vividly, even though this trip was 10 years ago. So for me, this family was just at a road stop in the middle of the Australian outback. Even at 37 miles an hour, I was doing 600 kilometres a day, 400 miles a day. So I would be riding from even before sunlight to way into sunset, camping wild, or across Australia, just camping on campsites or whatever I could find, really. This was just to make it up as you go along. As we talk about planning, well, what is planning? Planning is just tomorrow, really. I never really thought beyond tomorrow on this trip. But these were a couple I met, a family I met at a road stop in the middle of the outback, and they had kids, and they were just dead enthusiastic, as everyone was in the middle of the outback. The outback is a remote, lonely, isolating place until you get to a rest stop, when everyone just circles upon each other and shares where they're off to, what they're hoping to achieve, and where they've come from. So to me, the life is at the life point, the universe centres on these roadhouses in Australia. And for me, these were the kind of people I sort of met, and they stuck out to me. And then from Darwin into East Timor. And East Timor was a place I'd never heard of before I set off on this trip. I just got on a plane from Darwin with a bike on a boat. The bike, I couldn't sail on the same boat as the bike. So the next stop from Darwin is East Timor, the foot of Indonesia, which has got quite a interesting history with its independence from Indonesia, etc. But I knew nothing of that until I landed. And then I found myself in this, I guess, what we would define as a third world, that had just had a big war of independence against Indonesia, and I was surrounded by people. And in this early stage of the trip, I was very nervous of people, because these were different people to what I was used to in Mansfield, where I'm from, which we don't have many people who look like that in Mansfield. Or, in Sydney, the white enclaves of Sydney. So to suddenly find myself in a place like East Timor, which was war-ravaged, and there were people who suffered atrocities and murdered in their own homes and things like that, to suddenly be sort of parachuting into that world was really confronting, I guess. And, you struggle to adapt to that, because you're on your own, you're isolated. You are the only person who's going to solve your problems, So I think it's a great way to test your resolve in a difficult situation, to simply get off a plane in the middle of nowhere where you don't understand any language or know anyone, and think, crikey, I've got to ride to the other side of this nation of Indonesia. So people of Indonesia were just... Some were welcoming, some not so welcoming, some were curious, some were hostiles. But at all times, people stand out again. So this was a bike getting off the ferry or the shipping container from Darwin to East Timor. 10 years ago, the prices and the novelty was kind of there to keep the prices low. Since I did this, and since other people did this, the prices of all this sort of activity have escalated. People always talk about what's your budget. For me to ride from Sydney to London over 9 months, 23,000 miles, buying the bike, the carnet, the passage, all the visas, everything else, probably about £9,000, which if you've got 3 credit cards, just about do it on, which is what I did it on. So people say, so you asked me earlier, was it funded? I thought, yes, it was funded by MasterCard, Visa, and the old bank of mum and dad when I got run out of money in India. So this is certainly an aspiring middle class type of adventure, because anybody who really didn't have any backup probably wouldn't set off. But I knew, bless my mum and dad, that if I really got into trouble, they would probably bail me out. Thankfully, hopefully they did. But yeah, people. So riding through East Timor, I'm terrified. The UN are there, the army soldiers are there. Everything's hostile, and there's been atrocities, and don't trust anyone. I mean, everyone tells you don't trust anyone, which is probably the worst piece of advice anyone could give a traveller entering a world where you don't know anyone. Because if you don't know anyone, you've got to sometimes trust someone. And so you've really got to start to trust yourself, your own instinct, your own judgment, your own sort of place in the world, which takes a little bit of time. It probably took me 2 weeks to sort of get to the point where these kids at the side of the road, instead of being frightened of them and thinking, what do they want out of me? You just get off the bike and start talking to them, or communicating with them, and just relaxing in their world, because you are in their world, they're not in your world, you're a visitor to their world. And so if you're frightened of their world and you're passing through it, then you're only going to pass through terrified, which is not really a great way to travel. And I guess this is a problem with a slightly shorter trip. It never gives you time to feel comfortable in your own skin and your own position. So these guys, would you trust that chap to take your bike across a raging river? Maybe not. Maybe not tomorrow if I were going to NEC and river were flooded and they were there saying I'll carry a CB500X across the river. You might say no, thank you very much, I'll take the other way round. But in the middle of Indonesia and you need to get across that river, if those guys say we'll help you across, you say, well, okay, there's my bike, I'll see you on the other side. And they pick the bike up on their shoulders and carry it across the river. The beauty of a 97 kilo bike is that 2 men can lift it on their shoulders and carry it across the river. I mean, if I was to do this on a GS 1200, it would be slightly more problematic, and the poor villagers would have probably sank and floated down the river. But the whole petrol situation, so you've got to start trusting people that they're selling you petrol that's not been overly diluted with water, which it had been diluted with water. But you have to trust that petrol is going to at least get you to the next place where the chaps are running around with machetes. Looking back at these photos, it was such an immersive, beautifully reckless adventure, and it's one of those times where you've just got a chance to cut yourself free. So as a married man now with a 2-year-old and a mortgage and everything else, to have the opportunity to sleep rough under a shelter in the middle of Indonesia, even now I can't believe I had that opportunity to do that. Looking back now, was it a crazy thing to do? Not really. It was quite a sensible thing to do, to set off on a motorbike. And I think the problem is people ask too many questions as to whether they should do it to people who are probably more cautious than you are, which is why I never told anyone I was setting off from Sydney to London until 3 days into it, when I said, I actually messaged my parents and said, great news, I'm on my way home to England. And then P.S. I'm on a motorcycle, and I'll see you in, whenever. And my dad's a miner. He went down the pits. He never rode motorcycles, but I could tell by his support of the things I've done over the years that he maybe wishes he was of a generation which had this luxury of travel that we, certainly in my last 10 years, have had. Because you can tell there's something hidden in him that maybe wants to be in that photo, that wants to take off, that wants to leave Mansfield and Nottingham behind and set off on a motorbike. So I think vicariously I was doing my dad's trip for him, although he would never admit to that, because a man from Mansfield has no emotion. He can't show any emotion, because to do so down the pit is obviously going to lead you to the butt of many jokes. But as I move through Thailand, so again, you're working your trip out as you go. You've got a rough idea, so I know I can go from Indonesia to Malaysia. Okay, so I'm in Malaysia. Where do I go from there? Thailand. Okay, I can't go through Burma at the minute. How do I get through Burma, over Burma, around Burma? and get a plane over Burma into Nepal. Okay, then from Nepal where? India, China, Iran? Yes, no, sometimes. Can I get a visa for Iran? Not this time. Okay, what's the alternative? China, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Russia. So there was a real flexibility built into the trip based upon the fact that I'd set off with 2.5 days planning. And so it was the right moment, maybe not the right plan, but it involved a real certain willingness just to meander with the flow that life would throw at me as I progressed. And if I got into Iran, I got into Iran. If I didn't get into Iran, then I would find a way, because I needed to find a way to get around China. When I got to try and get across Burma, where was it? So I went to an embassy, and the man simply said, to get a visa for Pakistan, to get a visa for Pakistan, I would have to fly into England to get the visa to come back to Thailand. And that made perfect logical sense. For me, the mission, and it's all about the mission, and it's interesting about people who've been in the military, maybe there's a similar mindset to that. The mission is to get the bike home to England, not to get you home to England. The mission is to accomplish the journey that you'd set out on. So it didn't really matter that I would have had to fly to England to come back to Thailand to carry on to England. That was all part of the mission. So the geography of it didn't really matter. The purpose was getting to England. And I guess for me, as we all set off a motorcycle trip, sometimes we're testing ourselves, trying to find a purpose in life, trying to pursue something that dangles, like a carrot at the end of the road. Sadly, that road carries on and carries on and carries on, and you never get the carrot. But that was, I guess, what I learned in the Sydney to London trip, that notion that, doing a trip solves all your problems, completes the picture, in actual fact just creates a bigger picture, creates a bigger problem. But, setting off in a great whirlwind of naivety, for me, getting to England would have been a big problem-solving initiative completed. As it stands, I ended up having to go across America and get to Alaska on the same bike to find that sort of completion. So, yeah, for me, people. I met people, and I saw people, and I tried as my best to engage with people I met. And I think more so than ever, what is the purpose of travel? The purpose of travel is to meet people and to show that we are similar, we are alike, we share emotions, we share ambitions and goals, and the division isn't really quite there as people wish to present it. And quite frankly, I don't know why people wish to present that there is a division within us, because there's not really. This man had got nothing and worked in a shack making chapatis for travellers passing by who were homeless. I got nothing in common with this man, other than I guess essentially I was homeless. But we engaged in what was not a conversation, but was a communication in facial expressions and hand gestures and everything else that goes with communication. But we had a moment in this shack at the side of the road between Varanasi and Agra, or wherever it happened to be. And that man, I don't know his name, I don't know where he's from, I don't know if he's got sisters, brothers, but I remember that man fondly from that trip, and that man defines my trip. So as does that man. Where he came from, what he was doing, sleeping on the wicker mats under the roofless hut, who knows? So, we obsess with the things we see. The Taj Mahal, what a fantastic sight. I'll send that photo to a magazine because they'll think I'm amazing to see the Taj Mahal. But that photo means nothing. It's just a building. Represents nothing to me. But those kids who walking from it, they came and curious about the bike and who I was and where I was off to. And they clearly had dreamed about what they wanted to achieve in life, which makes you realise how lucky you are to be riding through their land on a motorcycle, on a frivolous credit card experience. Those guys probably would never be able to get to that position that I was in. But for a moment, we shared a bit of time. Monkeys, I also had a bit of time for monkeys. And just India. I mean, India's vibrant. India's a great place. It's a great place to test you in a motorcycle. 18,000 feet on a carburetted 7-brake horsepower motorcycle that doesn't have enough power to propel itself up a hill, certainly a Himalayan hill. So you have to get off and run with the bike and push the bike. So you become part of the engine, you become part of the bike's engine. You have 2 legs. And it was the same experience coming over the Rockies in Colorado. The bike doesn't have the power to propel itself over the mountain, so you get off and push it. And that gives you a great connection with the bike. Dorothy is the name of the bike, the name given by the previous owner, whose favourite character from A Wizard of Oz was Dorothy. I inherited Dorothy, and Dorothy still resides in North Devon and still gets thrashed mercilessly. Coming over the Karakoram Highway, which some of you have probably done on the Bullets, great riding, You know, do it now before they tarmac it or try and build tunnels through it, which they keep telling you they're going to do. And then obviously on the left is the right way to travel, which probably represents the car park here if this event was held in summer. So Michel was a Dutch guy riding to Pakistan. This was in Lahore in Pakistan. You know, terrible Pakistan, you're going to get beheaded, murdered and enslaved. None of those things happened. But I met Michelle and a few other travellers in this little hostel down a back street in Lahore, who are just magical people. The hostel run by magical people, and he was setting off on a mega adventure riding to Nepal. He was riding on that bike. His wife had left him. His children had decided to live with his mother. He spoke still fondly of the mother, even though obviously there'd been a lot of tussle in the family. But he was on a mission to reach Nepal. He was doing it in a different way to me, but he was doing it with the same driven mindset of getting on that bike in the morning, seeing how far he would get by the end of the day, and being content with that distance coming. And it was great to hang out with those. We did the Wagga Wagga border ceremony, and you know, occasionally we'd still swap Facebook messages. But he was a man who really encapsulated my experience in Pakistan. Not many people you meet, but fond memories of him. Who he was, I don't know. I just set a 10-second timer on, and then he wandered into shop with his 7-Up bottle and shook my hand. I don't know who he was, I don't know his story, but he liked my salwar kameez. So I was trying to dress like a Pakistani to blend in, but I had a helmet on, and very much cyclist in Pakistan wears a helmet. And the bodyguard, they're going to skip through photos. I mean, it's just people. It's people after people. And as I say again, I reiterate again, the beauty of the travel is the people. So if you're coming back purely with pictures of landscapes, maybe think about the people rather than landscapes. You know, this guy, middle of Kyrgyzstan, I'd not seen anybody for miles. I pull up, I don't know what I pulled up for, just to have a look or something, and a man on a horse trots up in the back, you know, behind me, and he gets me on the horse, and we go for a little ride on the horse. And I've never been on a horse before, ever in my life. But here we are in Kyrgyzstan with a random man who takes me on a little horse ride. And Dorothy is left in, you know, the side of the road, and off we go. And, you know, this guy, he's a German journalist, and they were travelling around Kyrgyzstan and Asia, and he had problems with his F-800, and we spent a few days trying to get across Kazakhstan. If anybody wonders what Kazakhstan's like before they laid tarmac, that's the main road across Kazakhstan. So, you know, again, what's the right bike for a trip? Well, if I'm sat on an autobahn, maybe an F-800. If this is the main road in Kazakhstan, maybe a 105cc postie bike. I had fun. That was a great road. I love that road. And then Andrea, the lady in the middle, she was having a mare on the F-800. As you can imagine. So there's a time and a place for every motorcycle. And for me, finally, I got back to England. My parents were glad. They were very happy that I'd survived in one piece. It cost about £9,000. I was dead fortunate. I got a book deal. Like, I'd been sending little postcards off to people, magazines and stuff on the way because I needed money. And the Sydney Morning Herald printed a little story, and a commission editor of a book read it and said, "Oh, that sounds interesting. Do you want to write a book?" Perfect, yeah. So I got home and I wrote a book. And then that's when you have to sit and reflect on everything you've done and achieved or not achieved, and enjoyed and not enjoyed. And the postman, because it's a postie bike, etc., etc. And then 3 years passed, and you know, as I found, the trip wasn't the cure. I got itchy feet, like because I'd done Sydney to London. I thought, where next? I've got to go again. That bike's fresh, cam chain, clutch plates. And new tyres, and she was ready to roll again. She'd now done 80,000 kilometres, original engine, ready to go. And we blazed across America, from New York to Alaska. This guy was like 83 and cycling 600 miles on a bike trip, camping wild. And Jack, he was playing the saxophone in Detroit, just to earn a bit of a living. He's trying to keep his son out of the gangs, the violent crime, the sort of gangs of Detroit. And I forget her name, but she got CT110. So yeah, these are the kind of pictures I just picked out. These guys were crossing America on push bikes, I mean, which is crazy. People say, wow, doing it on a 105cc bike. But then you meet people doing it with leg power. You think that's incredible. Emmett has set off from the west coast to the east coast when he was 18. He got to the Rockies, and then family illness or something had made him have to return. 40 odd years later, he got the push bike out again. flew back to where he left that last trip and was riding. He was completing that sort of 40-year-old trip to New York. So again, he was just somebody I met. I rode past him. I thought that guy might need some water. I'll stop and see if he needs water. And instead, we shared stories. And stories of the road again really brought great illumination. You know, Dog who got a big. He was on a big. What's the BMW? The RT. He was going from state to state. I mean, if nobody's ridden in America, it really is, for me, the most amazing motorcycling landscape, because the landscape's amazing, the riding's amazing, and the stories that you hear and you engage with just keep it alive and buzzing and different and exciting. Because everywhere you go, you meet people, and obviously you can share a language. You know, they even understood northern accent where we don't use T's. So, you know, they could understand it. We just hung out. This guy was cycling through Death Valley with 1 litre of water. He was cycling like 600 miles to a cycle festival in Las Vegas. I got to San Francisco. I went across America on $500. I ate McDonald's morning, noon, and night, and I slept in bushes.
How terrible.
It was. I actually enjoyed McDonald's, to be honest. Have you seen like Born Identity, when, you know, subconsciously they've got to do something to part of the program? Well, I can't ride past the McDonald's without stopping for a cheeseburger. And then I went north to Alaska. I was like kind of finding the journey end, and I was going north. This guy was ex-Hells Angels, and he obviously wanted to swap bikes, but I said no. Too small, need more. And these guys, Seth on the left, he was an ex-Mormon, ex-alcoholic, he was riding to Alaska for salvation. Calvin was on his way down from Alaska to get a boat to go to Russia, go around the world from Russia. And about 4 months after this photo was taken, he turned up at my house in Leamington Spa on that same KLR 650. And so the connectivity of the world, although it's been lost for the last 2 years, is still there. So I think as soon as we can, we need to re-engage, we need to meet people, we need to do this sort of thing. This is great to see. The NEC today was great to see kids getting on motorbikes, you know, to see people excited and buzzing and realising that, you know, we are only here for a limited period of time, and that, you know, making excuses is kind of a stupid thing to do, because, you know, it ends one day and we've got to get on with stuff. So I enjoyed doing Sydney to London. New York to Alaska really won me over. I have fond memories of that trip because I enjoyed America. I enjoyed taking the Royal Mail postal jacket from one side of America to the next. So I enjoyed the open-faced nature of it. I enjoyed meeting Charlie Boy and the late Paul Daniels. You know, in terms of what I'm up to now, so after all this, I started working as a journalist, and that I wasn't very good at journalism for whatever reason. Maybe I can't write. So I started doing tours in 2017. Took people to Land's End, Johnny Gross. I took 12 people across America on their own bikes. In 2019, I took 9 people across Australia, Brisbane to Perth on postie bikes. So I bought a fleet of CT110s from Joe in Caboolture in Brisbane, and we flew in. I got a support van, and we rode through 6,000 kilometres of dirt track through the outback. One guy broke his arm, and another guy broke his leg, spinal fracture, tibia and fibula. So in some ways it wasn't a successful trip. Nobody died. But I ended up with 9 Australian postal bikes back in North Devon, where we now live. So now I get the same experience. I get to see people. I get to meet people who are going out riding motorcycles. And the beauty for me is I have a wife who, you know, it seems like most men I meet hate their wives, which is a weird thing, and they wanted to get away from their wives. I actually like my wife still, maybe it's the honeymoon period, but I like being with her and our 2-year-old, and we have a dog, a chow chow called Martha, and I enjoy our time together. We've got a happy life, and I enjoy taking people out on these day trips, is what I do now, and we go out, and you don't have to have a beard, but the pleasure of motorcycling, the main message is the pleasure of motorcycling can be experienced in a 24-hour period. You know, we don't need to go miles and miles and miles to other continents, to far off places, to meet people, to see things, to do things. So I have the fleet of posties, I have a fleet of A2 bikes for people who are finding the big old bikes getting too big for them, and I've got a fleet of Enfields that I take people out on. So I've kind of turned what was an impromptu adventure into a bit of a cottage industry that keeps my wife happy, I think, and keeps me happy because I'm still enjoying motorcycle travel and everything that brings, and still enjoying the people I meet and all that element of it, which I guess is what defines motorcycling to me. We could spend hours talking about the right bike, the right kit, the right helmet, the right destination, the right ferry. In a way, it's irrelevant. It doesn't. None of that really matters. It's the people we experience motorcycling with. And so I would say 2022 is going to be a great year because we've had 2 years that have been rubbish years. And I think once we get out there, we're going to be desperate to meet people. We're going to be desperate to share our stories, and we're going to be desperate to see new things. So thank you for inviting me. If anybody wants to come down to Dorothy's Speed Shop, named after Dorothy's motorcycle, I'm in North Devon. We're in a beautiful part of the world. We have some beautiful dirt tracks. We have some beautiful coastal views. And actually, if anybody's interested, I've got the new Hunter Cubs, the CT125s, which aren't officially come to the UK, but we've managed to smuggle a few out of Thailand. Don't tell the Thai government, but yeah, we've got 5 CT125s. So, yeah, I just really want to wish you all well for the winter period, and I really hope that spring blossoms into a fantastic adventure. And again, Brian, thank you for inviting me. And again, if anybody wants to support Sam Manicom, get his books, because they are fantastic books, and he is a fantastic chap. So, and if anybody wants to buy my book, I do have copies at the back. But main thing, thank you all, enjoy Christmas, and have a fantastic New Year. Thank you very much.